Welcome to Understand the Math. In this video, we're going to learn how to perform three basic operations with matrices: matrix addition, matrix subtraction, and then scalar multiplication. We're going to start by reviewing the conditions for which you can add or subtract matrices, and then we'll walk through step-by-step examples for each operation. We'll then move on to scalar multiplication, where we multiply every element in a matrix by a constant. Let's begin by learning about matrix addition and subtraction. Two matrices can be added or subtracted if they have the same dimension. That means they need to have the same number of rows and the same number of columns. I've written down two steps that we can follow when we add or subtract matrices. The first step is to check that both matrices have the same dimension. And then the second step is to just add or subtract the corresponding entries. I've written down a formula so that you can better understand this. Let's say we have a matrix A and a matrix B, and we want to add or subtract these matrices. What we do when we add or subtract them is we take each corresponding entry, such as A11 in the first row and first column, and then B11 in the first row and first column, and we just add or subtract them. We do the same thing for all the other entries. Let's now work through some examples. For these examples, we are going to add or subtract the matrices. In our first example, we are going to add matrix A and B. Our first step is to look at the size of each of the matrices and see if we can actually add them. Matrix A has 2 rows and 3 columns, so we can write that it is a 2 by 3 matrix. I have a video on dimensions of matrices if you need to review that. And then matrix B also has 2 rows and 3 columns, so it is a 2 by 3 matrix. Because the size matches up, we can actually add the two matrices. Let's now go ahead and do that. When we add A plus B, we're going to add the corresponding entries. Let's look at the first entries. That's 2 and 0. So we just add 2 plus 0. And then we'll look at the next entry. That's 3 and 2. So we're going to add 3 plus 2. And then we're going to add 4 and 7. Now let's look at the second row. In the second row, we're going to add 1 and minus 1. Then we're going to add 3 and 3. And then lastly, we're going to add 1 and minus 5. Now let's go ahead and write down what all of these are. In the first row, we're going to have a 2, and then a 5, and then an 11. And then in the second row, we're going to get a 0, and a 6, and then a minus 4. When you get more practice on this, you can probably skip that first step that we wrote down and just add them in your head. Let's now look at our second example. It's A minus B, and we know the sizes are the same, so we can subtract them. I think with this one, let's see what it's like to not write down that middle step and just do the calculations in our head. I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm going to get rid of the marks that we made for A plus B. Now we can go ahead and look at A minus B. In the first entry, we're going to have 2 minus 0, so that's just going to be 2. In the second entry, we're going to have 3 minus 2, which is 1. And then in the third entry, we have 4 minus 7, which is going to give us a minus 3. Let's now look at the second row. We have 1 minus the negative 1, so that's 1 plus 1, which is 2. And then we have 3 minus 3, which is 0. And then we have 1 minus the negative 5, which is 1 plus 5, which is 6. Let's now look at our third example. This example is A plus C, So we have to go back to the first step and see if the sizes match up. If we look up here at matrix C, we see that it has 2 rows and 2 columns, so it is a 2 by 2 matrix. Notice that it is not the same size as matrix A. So what we're going to write for A plus C is we're going to say that this is undefined. That's the term that you typically use when you cannot add or subtract the matrices. Let's now look at our fourth example. In this example, we are going to add C and D. Let's make a note that matrix D is also a 2 by 2 matrix, so we can add C and D. I would suggest that you pause the video and do this one on your own. Matrix C plus D is equal to the first entries added, so that's 1 plus 4, which is 5. And then we're going to add 2 plus 0, which is 2. And then down in the second row, we're going to add 5 and minus 2, so that's 5 minus 2, which is 3. And then lastly, in the lower right, we're going to add 6 and 1, which is equal to 7. Let's now look at some examples with scalar multiplication. Scalar multiplication is when you just multiply a matrix by a constant. Any matrix can be multiplied by a scalar. So it's different than addition or subtraction, where sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. With scalar multiplication, you can always do it. To multiply a matrix by a scalar, what you have to do is multiply every entry in the matrix by that scalar. I've written down a generic example of this. Say we have a matrix A and we want to multiply that matrix by a constant C. All we're going to do is we're going to take each entry and we're going to multiply each entry by C. Let's walk through some examples so that we make sure we understand this. In our first example, we are going to multiply matrix A by 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to take every entry in matrix A and we're going to multiply it by 2 or just double it. Our first entry is 2 and we're going to multiply that by 2, so we get 4. And then the next entry is 3. We'll multiply that by 2 and get 6. And then our next entry is 4. Multiplying that by 2 gives us 8. We're going to do the same thing for the second row. We're going to take every entry, multiply it by 2. So we're going to end up with 2 and then 6 and then 2. For our second example, we're going to take that same matrix A and multiply it by minus 3. You may want to pause the video and do this one on your own. The solution to this one is going to be this. All we're going to do is we're going to take all the entries in matrix A and we're just going to multiply them by minus 3. So we get on the top row a minus 6, a minus 9, a minus 12. And then on the second row, we're going to get a minus 3, a minus 9, and then another minus 3. In our last example, we are going to combine everything we learned in this video. We are going to combine scalar multiplication with subtraction. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply matrix A by 3, and then we're going to subtract 2 times matrix B. Let's see what this looks like. Let's look at our first entries. 3 times 2 is 6, and then minus 2 times 0 is 0. Now let's go to the next entry, which is a 3 and a 2. We're going to multiply the 3 times 3, so that's going to be a 9, and then we're going to multiply the 2 by minus 2, so that's a minus 4. And then the entry in the upper right is 4 and 7, so we multiply 4 times 3, which is 12, and then 7 times minus 2, which is minus 14. Let's go ahead and let's do the same thing for the second row. We have a 1 and a minus 1. So this is going to be 3 minus 2 times minus 1 gives us a plus 2. And then our next entry is 3 and 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And then minus 2 times 3 is minus 6. And then for the last entry, we have 1 and minus 5. So 3 times 1 is 3. And then a minus 2 times a minus 5 is a plus 10. Now all we have to do is just combine those numbers. 6 minus 0 is 6. 9 minus 4 is 5. 12 minus 14 is minus 2. And then in the second row, we're going to have a 5, and then a 3, and a 13. And that's it. You now understand that you can only add and subtract matrices that have the same dimension. You perform these operations by combining the corresponding entries, and then you can multiply any matrix by a scalar.
If this video has been helpful to you, please consider subscribing to my channel. Keep believing in yourself and have a great rest of your day.